Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to welcome. I wasn't sure if I should be following Greg or I should have gone before him, but I think listening to the speakers this morning, we start to see some strong themes emerging through the day. I have for 18 years been the Auckland City Missioner. I've now changed roles and I'm deeply involved in data, and most people sort of go, how did you get from giving out food parcels to leading a conversation about data in New Zealand? What is very little known about me is that I am actually a geek. I have written computer programs for many, many years, and I've managed computer services. And I have to say, after 18 years in social services and having gone back into the geeky environment, I feel so very comfortable. And so, but the skills from both organisations can be used. I want to talk a little bit about those today. One of the things that we knew at the City Mission was that poverty continues to grow. A quick Google search will tell you there's 285,000, probably more, children living in poverty in New Zealand. And if you look at your sports research, they will also say that these are children that are not involved in sports sector. So that we do have a commonality to start with. They live in homes with under 60% of the median income. They go without the things they need. And 10% of those kids are at the very hardest end of poverty. 3 out of 5 children in New Zealand live in poverty every day, which means they get up, they don't have breakfast, they're frequently cold, they have health issues, they have poor educational outcomes, poor social outcomes, poor justice outcomes, and they do not probably enter the world of recreation and sport. There's lots of statistics out there about poverty. People have been researching child poverty in New Zealand for the last 15 years. And while we've been researching it, the problem just keeps growing and growing, which means that we're not making any headway with it. One of the indicators have been the number of food parcels. And the City Mission was just one of very few food banks giving out food parcels. In fact, there's 80 in the Auckland area, 80 food banks, and so we're just one. And you can start to see the numbers. It just keeps increasing and increasing year after year. And year after year, we go out for funding, we take our begging bowls, and we tell the sad stories of people living in poverty and ask everybody to give us money to continue to give out more food parcels. I began to think this wasn't the right way to go about things. And so I started to question what stops people moving out of poverty. A really simple question in one way. And what we did was decided that statistics don't give us the right information. I can tell you how many children, I can tell you where they come from, I can run the demographics over them, I can get the data from Statistics New Zealand. But what we fail to do is talk to the very people who are living in poverty. And this may be a theme you start to get. If you want to find out what's going on, you have to engage with the people who are either using or not using your services to find out what's happening and what you need to do. We took 100 families out of our database of 15,000 people, and we applied the same demographic rules to the people who come to us for food parcels. 85% of them were women, which would come as no surprise. These are the ones that come with food parcels. 40% were Maori, a high percentage were Pacific Islanders, a lower percentage were Asian. Most of them are around the 35 to 45-year-old mark. So we took our demographics, but then we decided to do some things differently. We decided to ask questions in different ways. The first question we asked is, tell us about your family. And frequently we get a form. You know, if you go to ACC or you go to WINS, they give you a form and they put your name and your address and your husband's name and how many children you've got. And if you go to work and income, you can only have the children that are sort of matched to you. Okay? So I often tell the story, I am an only child, and everybody can get that. You know, you can actually start the whole thing of I'm spoilt and precocious and I'm a first. I'm actually the youngest of 5, and when I was born, there were 5 children under the age of 5. So you got that? It's not too difficult. I have 2 half-brothers and 2 half-sisters. My father was married previously, and his wife died when she was 29. And my mother was into relationships on a serial basis, and she had a few children along the way. My mother and my father were brother and sister-in-law. Now, if anyone's still got the plot at this point, put your hand up. Okay? But I can draw a picture of this, and I could draw it when I was 8. And every family that we see can draw a picture of that. And what we forget in families today is that children don't necessarily belong in either nuclear or step-parenting families. Children are co-parented all over the place. They come at weekends, they go for weeks, not just poor kids, rich kids as well, traipse from one house to the other. And the step-parent after step-parent after step-parent. My story is nothing new, but the way we told it actually showed us a completely different way of looking at families and engaging with families. The second thing we did is we asked people what services they used and engaged in. And usually you do the same linear old form that says, we went to such and such and such and such. What we did was actually ask families who they engaged with in a 2-week period. Okay? And of 100 families, this was pretty common. And in case you want to count, there's 45 different agencies involved with a family. I am, when I'm being politically insensitive, often say, and then Paula, and I often say benefit rather than Bennett, says, go out and get a job. And you sort of go, they've already got one. Take a note. Have a look how many sports activities are in there. Have a look how many libraries are there, or recreation, or good things about life. Every single agency they're involved in has a negative connote. And the lines on that actually go, if it's a healthy relationship, it's solid, a solid line. If it's a broken relationship, it's a dotted line. And actually you see some of the healthiest relationships and the strongest relationships people have are with people who collect debts off them, which is a very sad statement. For every agency they go to, they fill out a form. They tell the same questions time and time and time again. And what happens is they learn to give the answers to the question that you're expecting. So I've actually experienced this not long ago with ACC. I had a fall and broke my neck and my jaw, and I actually learned, having gone to 18 different health providers and told the same story, that it gets really boring. And that people are looking for an answer in order to give you service. And after a while, you find out how you're meant to do that. And also, you get a little bored with your own story, and you're trying to see when people's lights come on. Like I fell off a cliff is actually far more better than I fell in a ditch. So actually, people are all the time telling us different stories about what's going on. What it also teaches us is that we do the same thing time and time again. And we expect that things will be different. People go to the agencies provide the same service, and I am off to say when I go back, this is a picture of what we call a stuffed family, going to stuffed agencies, and they are navigated around them by semi-stuffed caregivers. And there's a lot of money in this system. How do people think they're going to solve it? By networking. Networking is the answer to all evils. Networking will make this system better. Well, let me tell you, this networking will only make the people who are providing the poor services feel better about themselves. And so we had a thing in our agency, you couldn't network, you could only go if there was a strategic imperative to visiting someone else. It actually changes the way you think about relationship. So we continue to do the same thing all the time. And often we come up with answers that aren't right. So the data doesn't always give us the right answer. So let me tell you about Amelia. Amelia is what we called, when she was 18, a debt virgin. She got into a relationship with a young man and got pregnant, which is fairly common for quite a few of the young people we see. And he said to her, Amelia, my mum doesn't have a car and she's got a really low credit rating, so would you sign the form? And Amelia said yes. And then they wanted a television, then they needed a washing machine, and then they needed something else. Now Amelia signed all these forms without reading the fine print. And whilst you're thinking, bad, put your hand up if you've read all your terms on your telephone. I asked 250 data analytics, who's read Facebook, Google and telephone? One same person had read all three. The rest of us, we don't read what's in front of us, but we'll blame her, we'll blame Amelia for not doing the right thing. After 3 or 4 years, Amelia doesn't have the partner. She's happily got rid of the mother-in-law. She hasn't got the car, she hasn't got the washing machine, and what she's actually got is a lot of debt. And so Amelia then has to go to the grocery truck, she has to go to the everything where it's really high interest. So 171 to 700% interest is the rates that we see on a reasonably regular basis. Amelia is pretty well absolutely stuffed. There's nowhere she can go. Her debt is so huge, she will never, ever get over it. So the solution we come up with, let's make her budget. And we set up hundreds of budgeting agencies all throughout New Zealand. And because that hasn't worked particularly well for people like Amelia, we've got a new one called financial literacy. And if any of you know the Tamaki area in Auckland is one of the most deprived areas, we have 27 financial literacy not-for-profits, all helping Amelia, who's so stuck in debt that actually she just might get literate enough to understand it, but it won't make any changes. So you can have the data, and you can have the stories, and you can still come up with the wrong outcomes. Okay? So you need to think about when you're going out that just because we have data and we have stories doesn't mean to say that we've got the solution. And at the moment we make people go to multiple agencies, we make the process really difficult, we set up sanctions and conditions to create compliance, and we fund a range of services and issues that actually have nothing to do with the problem whatsoever. Well done us. And I'm not going to give you what the answer is to this either. But what my role really is to be is a constructive irritant around these issues, to start people thinking about different ways the world is moving. We're moving from a rigid, rule-based system into a more complex and iterative system. And if any of you know about Carnarvon framework of understanding where we're at, you could probably relate, and it's probably quite good that I came after Greg today, because if you look at the chaotic part of this, he will tell you that's when Christchurch earthquake happened. That in chaos, you run around trying to find the answer. In an obvious system, it's tightly constrained. There's no degrees of freedom, and you sense something, you categorise it and respond. And actually, you have to have these systems. You know, the surgeon that's operating on you, you want to make sure that they have good systems about counting all of the things, instruments that they used on your surgery. You really don't want anything left inside you. And so there is a need often for really good systems. But what we often do is decide that everything can be in this system. Everything can be cause and effect, and if we just follow cause and effect, we'll solve whatever problems we've got. If it's not that, we then say it's complicated. And we bring in a whole lot of data analysts and bureaucrats and experts to give us their opinions. And so we start to look at analysing it and responding. You still don't always get it right. You might, and if you do, you continue to use what you've got. But if you don't, you tip it out. Okay? So some of the stuff about poverty is that. But what we're really doing nowadays is working in a much more complex world. And in a complex world, we have to start being really iterative. We have to start thinking about looking at issues, probing them, describing our systems, talking to people, and May 10 told you that this morning. Greg followed up saying the same sort of thing. You need to be talking to the people who are the users and the non-users and the future users of your systems, not the people you already know. Talking to yourselves will come out with the same outcome. And I was talking to somebody the other day about design thinking. And there's a great place for design thinking when you all sit in a room and put up the little stickies. The problem is if you've all got the same belief system or the same thinking, it's just a collective stupidity at times. You know? You've got to get outside of that and think more broadly. This is not a 4x4 matrix, and I would encourage you to go online and look at it. It's from Dave Snowden, and he comes from a background that's about anthroposophy, social, data-driven, and it's also not 4 quadrants. It basically is about different environments for working. So if you actually took it to a birthday party, you'd say at Chaotic, we'd just let the kids do whatever they like and just go for it. And they'd get into the alcohol cabinet and they'd burn your house down. Yep. If you were doing the obvious at a birthday party, you'd plan it. You'd have a party planner. You'd have a purpose and an outcome before you started. And you'd probably at the birthday party even stand up the front with your PowerPoint and tell the children how it was all going to happen. Afterwards, you would tightly look at it. And if the children weren't happy, they'd give them a happiness scale so you could improve your work next time. If you were in a complex environment, you'd give them some boundaries and say, you do that, you're dead. And then you'd throw in a football and some games, and you'd see which one people responded to. Which ones did the kids like? Did they enjoy going out for the game of football? Would they rather do something else? And you keep on repeating the things that worked and pushing the things that failed outside. And the next time you have a birthday party, you have a little bit of an iterative process about it. So in one sense, it's quite a simple system. In another sense, it's a really, really good thing to be thinking differently about what you need to do. One of the things about this system is also about using data and stories. We seem to have gone between two. We've got a real thing at the moment about data. Data is the answer to everything. Well, actually, data isn't the answer to everything. Or the data we've got isn't the answer to everything. And if I go back to Amelia, nobody in New Zealand has the data about third-tier lenders. Nobody knows anything about Amelia's debt because the government doesn't collect that sort of data. So we're starting to get in a realm where you don't know what it is you're asking for. There's some fascinating work about small countries where actually using data and using people's Twitter responses. And in India, they're using it for children, massive amounts of children, twittering about what's happening in their day, things that are improving their lives and things they aren't, and collecting data in completely and utterly different ways. As you move forward, you have to not go and copy someone else. It's one of the quickest ways to fail. You know? The people who are succeeding are developing things that are different. If you're going to embrace somebody else's learnings, be sure that you're thinking and testing and seeing if it works in your environment. Don't just dump it on. There's plenty of recipes for failure, and that's the quickest one. What you need to be doing, and interestingly enough, this has just been taken up by the Australian government about data more than anything, is discovery. Map your landscape. Find the real needs and define the real problems. They're not just what you might think they are. Think outside the square. Test your hypothesis when you've got it. You know, the hypothesis about Amelia was that she's just not good at coping, or she can't read, or she's just not financially literate. There's a whole other hypothesis that we could test, and you test them with your user groups, You test them with the people that you ask for the information in the first place. And then define a minimally viable product. One of the things we're going to have to start doing is do small things, do them quickly, and see if they work. We're often told that in new startups, 85% fail. And one of the reasons for that is because we've been investing a lot of money in startups and staying with them till they fail well down the line. We need to start thinking earlier whether they're failing or they're succeeding. So you start up, you define a small product that you can do or a small service, and you test it out by going live. Agile development, which actually is, what you should be in. You're a sports organisation. Agile development is about iterating. It's about trying something and figuring it out. Agile processes and outcomes do not guarantee success, but actually continuing to do what you've always done will certainly help you to celebrate doing the same thing and will lead you in the future to failing, because we are changing as a country, we are changing in the way we interact, we are changing who we are ethnically, and we are changing the very nature of how New Zealanders are engaged in an organisation such as yours. Being agile, iterating, trying, and engaging the people that you are serving and the ones you don't even know about yet is the key to moving forward as a successful organisation that continues to grow. Thank you for your time.